without Brock Purdy at time, without Ricky Pearsall, without Trent Williams, without Brandon Ayuk the entire season. And the way that Christian McCaffrey has put this team on his back and the utilization of him by Kyle Shanahan, strategically and schematically, it is the greatest year I've ever seen a play caller have. And
think about it. They got the Rams. The NFC playoff picture is Rams, Seahawks, Niners, Bears. Y'all telling me the Niners can't beat those teams? Don't do that, Shady. The Niners are capable of beating all of them.
Nobody saw this coming. Not analysts, not fans, not even most NFC teams. Because how does a franchise that spent half the season injured, unstable, and written off suddenly become one of the scariest matchups in football? How does a team missing stars, rotating quarterbacks, and battling roster chaos flip the narrative and walk into the playoffs looking dangerous? That's exactly what the San Francisco 49ers did, and the story behind it is way bigger than the box score. All season long, the outside world kept calling them lucky, saying they survived on schemes, claiming their wins didn't mean much. But behind the scenes, something completely different was happening. This wasn't luck. This was a calculated reset, a quiet rebuild of identity, and once it clicked, it changed everything. Think about the context. Brock Purdy missed time. Brandon Ayuk was gone. Trent Williams was sidelined. The defense lost cornerstone players. Most teams would have folded. Most locker rooms would have fractured. Instead, San Francisco leaned into chaos and turned it into momentum.
Those teams.
You know, I think such a big part of playoff football, the teams that keep going, are the teams that are actual teams that constantly pick each other up. I don't know there's a better example than the 49ers all year long.
That's what made this version of the 49ers dangerous. Not flashy highlights, not viral plays, but a ruthless ability to adapt when nothing went according to plan. By the end of the regular season, the shift was obvious. Christian McCaffrey was carrying the offense on his back. Kyle Shanahan was calling games at a level that even veteran coaches admitted was elite. And somehow, despite everything stacked against them, San Francisco finished with a 12-5 record and punched their ticket into the postseason as a wild card nobody wanted to see on their side of the bracket. Then came the playoff shocker, road game, short-handed roster, facing the defending champs. And yet, the 49ers walked into hostile territory and walked out with a win. That moment flipped the league's perception overnight. Suddenly, this wasn't the injured underdog anymore. This was a team that figured out how to survive pressure and weaponize it. But here's the part most people missed. The real turning point didn't happen in the playoffs. It didn't happen during a highlight play. It happened months earlier, when the organization made one quiet decision that reshaped the entire season. And once you understand that move, everything about this 49ers run starts to make sense. To understand how the 49ers pulled this off, you have to rewind to the season that almost broke them. Because before this turnaround, San Francisco was in free fall. The 2024 season was a disaster, a 6-10 finish. One of the worst records the franchise had posted in years. Injuries piled up at a historic level. According to internal league tracking, the 49ers ranked near the top in games lost to injury value. And it wasn't role players going down, it was the core of the roster. Christian McCaffrey missed most of the season after dealing with Achilles and knee issues. Brandon Ayuk was lost early with a major knee injury. Trent Williams, Jordan Mason, and multiple starters on both sides of the ball rotated through injured reserve. On defense, consistency vanished. What used to be a feared unit suddenly couldn't close games. The offense didn't look much better. Kyle Shanahan's system, once praised as unstoppable, started to look predictable. Drives stalled. Big plays disappeared. And for the first time in years, fans started asking uncomfortable questions. Was the Super Bowl window closing? Was this core aging out? Was the system finally getting figured out? By the end of that year, the narrative was brutal. Analysts openly questioned whether San Francisco had missed its championship window. Some even floated the idea that a soft rebuild was coming. But rock bottom does something powerful to elite organizations. It forces honesty. Instead of panicking, the front office made a move that didn't dominate headlines, but quietly changed everything. A move that would end up redefining the defense, stabilizing the locker room, and setting the foundation for what happened next. And once that decision kicked in, the entire tone of the season shifted fast. While most fans were focused on draft rumors and free agency chatter, the 49ers made a decision that flew under the radar, but ended up reshaping their entire season. They brought back Robert Sale. On paper, it looked familiar. Sale had already been in San Francisco before. He knew the building, he knew the culture, but this version of the roster was completely different. The defensive stars that once powered his system were gone. Dre Greenlaw was no longer there. Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga weren't part of the core anymore, and injuries had already started thinning the depth chart. This wasn't a ready-made defense. This was a rebuild in disguise. Instead of trying to recreate the old unit, Sale adjusted. He simplified responsibilities. He leaned into effort, discipline, and communication. Less flash, more reliability. The goal wasn't dominance, it was survival. Then week 1 arrived, and chaos hit again. San Francisco's starting quarterback went down early. Just like that, the season felt cursed before it even started. Social media immediately declared it over. Analysts started talking about draft position instead of playoff seeding. But inside the building, something different was happening. The coaching staff didn't flinch, the locker room didn't fracture, and the next man up stepped into a situation nobody expected him to handle. What was supposed to be a short-term emergency solution turned into the first sign that this team was built differently. And that's when the 49ers started proving that their identity wasn't tied to one star. It was tied to the system. But that was only the beginning. Because the real engine of this turnaround was about to wake up, and once it did, everything changed. If there was one moment where the 49ers officially flipped the narrative, it was when Christian McCaffrey reminded everyone exactly who he is. Coming off an injury-riddled year, there were quiet doubts floating around. Whispers that the mileage was catching up, that the explosiveness wasn't the same, that maybe San Francisco would have to manage his workload carefully. Instead, McCaffrey went the opposite direction. He became the offense. With the quarterback situation unstable and the receiving core dealing with injuries, Shanahan leaned all the way into his most reliable weapon, and McCaffrey delivered on every level, between the tackles, out of the backfield, in the slot, on third down, in the red zone. Defenses knew the ball was coming to him, and it didn't matter. He controlled tempo, he extended drives, he gave backup quarterbacks easy reads and safe outlets. When protection broke down, McCaffrey turned broken plays into positive yards. When the offense stalled, he jump-started it again. But the most impressive part wasn't just the stats. It was the consistency. Week after week, he showed up. No excuses, no drop-off. No load management. He became the stabilizer for a team that desperately needed one. And once Brock Purdy returned to the lineup, McCaffrey's impact multiplied. Suddenly, play action opened up. Linebackers hesitated. Safeties froze. The entire Shanahan offense unlocked again. That's when San Francisco stopped surviving and started hunting. But as powerful as the offense looked, the biggest shock of the season was happening on the other side of the ball. Because while stars were dropping, backups were stepping up. And what the defense pulled off next caught the entire NFC off guard. On paper, this defense had no business holding up. No Nick Bosa, no Fred Warner, star after star missing time, linebackers rotating weekly. Secondary held together with depth pieces and rookies. For most teams, that's a collapse waiting to happen. But Robert Sale didn't let it fall apart. Instead of chasing perfection, he chased control. He adjusted coverages. He disguised pressure. He focused on situational football. Red zone stops, third down discipline, forcing field goals instead of giving up touchdowns. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Backups were suddenly playing like veterans. Role players were winning individual matchups. Defensive rotations stayed fresh. Communication tightened. Missed assignments dropped. And most importantly, the unit played together. They bent constantly, but they didn't snap. Games that should have turned into blowouts stayed close. Drives that should have ended in touchdowns stalled at the 20-yard line. That kept San Francisco alive long enough for the offense to strike when it mattered most. And then came the moment nobody expected. On the road, against the defending champions, with half the starting lineup missing, San Francisco walked into hostile territory and outworked the Eagles. Late in the game, the defense locked in. Pressure hit home. Coverage tightened. And while the offense found just enough rhythm, the defense slammed the door in the fourth quarter. That win wasn't about talent. It was about belief. It was proof that this team wasn't fluking its way into relevance. They were earning it the hard way. But the story still wasn't finished. Because just when momentum peaked, reality delivered one more brutal test. And what happened next nearly changed the entire playoff picture. This was the stretch that changed how people talked about Brock Purdy. When he came back from injury, San Francisco wasn't sitting comfortably at the top of the conference. They were fighting for positioning, fighting for respect, fighting to prove this season wasn't just survival mode dressed up as success. And Purdy understood the assignment immediately. He didn't come back forcing hero throws. He didn't try to play outside the system. Instead, he leaned into efficiency, timing, and control. Quick reads, smart decisions, ruthless accuracy. The kind of quarterbacking that doesn't trend on highlight reels but quietly wins games. With McCaffrey commanding defensive attention and George Kittle working the middle of the field, Purdy started carving teams apart underneath. Linebackers hesitated. Safeties froze. Play action opened windows that Shanahan's offense is built to exploit. And Purdy hit them consistently. What stood out most wasn't arm strength or flashy scrambling. It was composure. Late-game drives didn't feel rushed. Third-and medium situations didn't feel panicked. He played like someone who fully owned the offense. Even with injuries still stacking up around him, missing receivers, rotating linemen, constant lineup changes, Purdy stabilized everything. The offense finally looked organized again, balanced again, dangerous again. By the time the regular season wrapped up, the numbers told the story. Over 2,000 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, a passer rating north of 100, not because he chased stats, but because the system worked when he executed it cleanly. But here's the part people forget. The pressure didn't disappear. Week 18 exposed how thin the margin really was. Seattle bottled up the run game. The offense stalled. Purdy struggled. The loss knocked San Francisco out of first round by contention and forced them into the wildcard round. That moment could have unraveled everything. Instead, it sharpened them. Because when the playoffs arrived, Purdy didn't blink. 2 touchdowns, command of the offense, calm under pressure on the road against the defending champions. That wasn't system quarterback talk anymore. That was leadership under fire. And that win didn't just advance San Francisco. It sent a warning to the entire NFC. Because this team wasn't finished yet. This is where the season should have collapsed. No Nick Bosa, no Fred Warner, multiple starters gone, rotation players forced into full-time roles. On paper, this defense had every excuse to fall apart. But Robert Sale refused to let that happen. Instead of chasing dominance, he chased discipline. Instead of asking backups to become stars, he asked them to execute assignments. Gap control, clean tackling, smart coverage disguises, bend, don't break football. And it worked. San Francisco gave up yards, sure, but they stopped touchdowns when it mattered most. Red zone stands, third down pressure, timely blitz packages that confused quarterbacks just enough to create mistakes. Rookies stepped up. Practice squad call-ups played meaningful snaps. Guys nobody outside the building knew suddenly mattered in playoff-level moments. And then came the game nobody expected them to survive. On the road, against the defending champions, missing half the defensive core, the odds stacked completely against them. Yet the defense showed up with attitude. They forced long drives. They tightened up in the fourth quarter. They made the Eagles earn every inch of field position. While the offense found rhythm late, the defense delivered the stops that made the comeback possible. Holding a defending champion offense to 3 fourth-quarter points with that many injuries isn't luck. That's coaching. That's preparation. That's culture. Sale turned chaos into structure. He turned patchwork lineups into functioning units. And he gave San Francisco something priceless heading into the postseason. Belief. Because once a team realizes it can survive without its stars, it stops playing scared. And that belief carried straight into the playoffs. But the story still wasn't finished. Because what happened next exposed just how dangerous this version of the 49ers had actually become. This is where everything came together. After stumbling in Week 18 and losing their shot at the top seed, most teams would have walked into the playoffs shaken. Doubt usually creeps in, confidence fades, momentum disappears. San Francisco did the opposite. They walked into the wild card round with nothing to protect and everything to prove. On the road, against the defending champions, short-handed again, the stage couldn't have been bigger. And they didn't flinch. Brock Purdy played controlled, efficient football. No panic throws, no forced hero ball, just smart reads and timely decisions. Christian McCaffrey took over the physical side of the game, breaking tackles, extending drives, and keeping the defense honest. But the real difference showed up late. When the fourth quarter hit, the 49ers raised their level. While the Eagles tightened up, San Francisco got aggressive. The play calling opened up, the tempo increased, and suddenly the game tilted. 2 scoring drives, defensive stops stacked back-to-back, and a stadium full of fans went quiet. Outscoring the defending champs in the fourth quarter wasn't coincidence. It was composure. It was preparation. It was a team that had already survived too much to be intimidated now. That win wasn't just a playoff advance. It was a message. The 49ers weren't a lucky wild card. They weren't a feel-good story. They were a dangerous matchup nobody wanted on their side of the bracket. And that's when the league finally realized something important. San Francisco hadn't just survived the chaos. They had evolved because of it. But the biggest takeaway wasn't the win itself. It was what it revealed about who this team had become. And that realization changed how the entire NFC viewed them going forward. Here's the part most people still don't fully understand. This isn't the most talented 49ers roster Kyle Shanahan has ever had. It's not the flashiest, it's not the healthiest, but it might be the most dangerous. Because this team learned how to survive without comfort. They won games without star receivers. They stayed alive without defensive anchors. They adapted when quarterbacks went down. They leaned on system, chemistry, and discipline instead of depending on perfect conditions. That changes everything in January football. When chaos hits bad weather, hostile crowds, injuries, pressure moments, this version of San Francisco doesn't panic. They've already lived there. Christian McCaffrey became the backbone. Brock Purdy became steady instead of spectacular. The defense became stubborn instead of dominant. and Shanahan stopped chasing perfection and started coaching survival. That's what makes this team scary. Not hype, not headlines, not star power. Resilience. And that's why the NFC should have paid attention earlier. Because the 49ers didn't sneak into the playoffs. They forged their way in. And now that they're here, nobody is excited about seeing them on the schedule.